All right, we're going to be shining a light on domestic violence now and share some numbers with you, all part of our conversation about the It's On Us campaign. First slide coming up here, we're going to be speaking about domestic violence and women specifically. 1 in 4 women will experience domestic violence during their lifetimes. Now, women ages 18 to 34 are at the greatest risk of becoming victims of domestic violence. And more than 4 million women experience some sort of physical or sexual assault from their own partners. And in 2 out of every 3 female homicide cases, females are killed by a family member or an intimate partner. Going to look a little bit deeper now into the consequences of domestic violence. Now, domestic violence is the 3rd leading cause of homelessness among families. People fleeing bad situations involved in their homes wind up in our homeless system here. And at least 1/3 of the families using New York City's shelter system are homeless due in direct proportion because of direct domestic violence incidences. Without help, girls who witness domestic violence are more prone to be victims of domestic violence as teens or into their adult lives. Looking at young men who witness domestic violence in their homes, boys are more likely to become perpetrators themselves of domestic violence and become abusers as adults. So that's just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to domestic violence. And we're going to get into It's On Us right in the A block.
Late last year, due to the rise in demand, New York City added more housing for homeless adults and children fleeing domestic violence. About 3 months ago, the City Council passed legislation making it illegal to refuse to rent or sell a home to someone because of domestic abuse calls or because they're the victim of a stalker. But recent reports still paint a bleak picture for what some call the new face of domestic violence, teenagers and young adults.
That's right. Many organizations and campaigns are working hard to not just change the statistics, but to fundamentally shift the way that we think about sexual and intimate partner violence. Now, give us a better understanding, we want to welcome Assistant District Attorney Michelle Kaminsky, the Domestic Violence Bureau Chief for the Brooklyn DA's Office. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and we're also happy to welcome back Juan Ramos. He's an activist and educator working with men and boys, challenging sexism and promoting healthy masculinity. Thanks for joining us again, Juan. Happy to see you.
Likewise.
Okay, so to begin this discussion, this movement started on college campuses, but it's sort of morphed and become so much more than that. So can you tell us exactly what is the It's On Us campaign?
So the It's On Us campaign started, the White House started the campaign to raise awareness and educate around college sexual assault. And last October, October's Domestic Violence Awareness Month, our district attorney, Ken Thompson, held a conference for Domestic Violence Awareness Month and had the co-architect of the It's On Us campaign, Greg Schultz, come from the White House to speak. We had over 200 people at the conference. It was held at Brooklyn Law School to discuss the campaign. And when we heard about the campaign, we said, this is something we could really bring to our community here and engage all of Brooklyn and in terms of awareness and education, but not just limited to sexual assault, but also talk about intimate partner violence. So a couple of weeks ago, we had our first event at the Sexual Assault Yearly Speak Out, which is an event in downtown Brooklyn to raise awareness around sexual assault. There are a number of organizations that had tables at the event, and we had the logo, It's On Us, with the district attorney's logo inside of the It's On Us campaign, and that is how it is been launched.
Very cool. So, Juan, we know you've been here multiple times. You wear a lot of hats. You work with a lot of organizations, and you've even been honored for your work, from street violence and now to domestic violence and intimate partner stuff. So I wonder, what are the different approaches that you're using to sort of tackle this problem of street violence versus stuff that happens behind closed doors?
Well, I think one of the first things that we've been looking at, for example, is through some of the community work that's going on, really understanding that some of that community violence, for example, could be tied to some of that domestic violence. We know, as you've seen in your statistics, that a lot of young men who grow up in homes where abuse is taking place grow up to be offenders themselves. Yeah. A lot of those same young men we find that could be the ones committing and perpetrating violence in their own community. And when we ask ourselves the questions, where do they learn the violence? It's easy to point to the streets and talk about all the things that are happening between young people. But the reality is that some of us sometimes learn that behavior at home. So the behaviors and attitudes that we learn at home, we sometimes embrace on the streets, and it just becomes louder and more fixated on the streets rather than where the origin is.
Right, so that's where you learn it, and this is where you practice it before, in some instances, going back into your own home and doing it in your new family.
I have to ask, it says it's on us. Now, Michelle, the book that you wrote, focused on how people can be victimized again as they try to deal with the criminal justice system. And, a lot of these crimes go unreported. But what exactly do you mean it's on us? Who is the us?
It's the entire community, that everyone has a role to play. However, from a small role to a big role, just our attitudes and beliefs, jokes you hear, things that you find acceptable, that you turn a blind eye and allow it to go on. That everyone has a role to speak out, and if they see something, to say something and to do something. And that's the message that we want to give with the campaign. But the campaign is really, it's comprehensive. It's not just sending the message, it's on us, but we're really looking to work very closely with many different organizations, schools. We have a lot of colleges in Brooklyn. We want to be on the college campuses to train, to educate. We're looking to work with the nightlife community. People are going out to bars where bartenders are on the front lines to see what's going on. So we're really trying to expand out the message that all of us have a part to play in ending violence against women.
Hence the pledge on your website.
Yeah, on the
It's On Us website.
On the It's On Us website, that's right. And it gets people to think, well, what does that mean, it's on us? What is on me? And then you could start thinking about, what can I do differently?
Well, It's On Us is a great message, and it is something that sticks in your mind. But I'm thinking back, I know a lot of us were raised in households where they say what happens in the house stays in the house. This is like our family business, and we don't need people involved. So how do you counter those messages that so many people hear so young with the new stuff and raising their awareness to say this isn't cool, even though this is the only thing you've seen?
Well, I think first we have to kind of make the conversation non-taboo, where we have these conversations in our community, we have them regularly. We also have them where people congregate most. And when I say that, I mean in particular men. Right? Because we have to get the message out to men that they have a specific role to play in ending violence against women. If women could have done this, they would have done it on their own decades ago. We wouldn't be here having this conversation. But the reality is that men have to play a role in ending violence against women because they're the highest perpetrators of violence against women. With that said, there are many good men in our community, men who counter the message of it's okay to be violent against women, use violence against women. And it's those men that I believe had the bigger job, because it's the good guys that have to say to those guys that are caught perpetrating the violence, to listen,
better.
right? You know better, and I think that as men, we listen to one another more than what we listen to women on. And the reality is that we need to use that collective power that we have amongst each other to kind of take the message and take it to the next level. If I'm a perpetrator in my community, there has to be a calculated community response to dealing with me. And that means that every single institution, every single place where men congregate has to send the message that violence against women we have a zero tolerance for it, and that I'm going to be held accountable for it. That doesn't mean that holding someone accountable doesn't come with a little bit of love as well, right? Because what we know as men is what we've been taught as men. Right. And to unlearn that is not going to happen overnight. There has to be campaigns, there have to be different things that we do in order to really make inroads into addressing the violence, changing the outlook that men have on what it is to be a man in a relationship, what it is to be a man in a family, how we raise our children, our young boys. We have to give a different example. And I think that if we all, get off the sidelines and begin to take action, that as men, we can create the change that's necessary for us to even benefit from this, right? Mm-hmm. Because we all have women in our lives that we care and we love, and just to think of someone putting their hands on my daughter, to me says a lot. Yeah. Because I would want to create a safe world where all women are safe. right? And that means that I have to jump into
I
that.
do want to just sort of follow up on that question, because New York is such a diverse place. Do you find that culture sort of plays a big role into that? And how do you deal with the different sort of, just the diversity and pervasiveness of different perspectives when it comes to this subject matter?
Yeah, I think culture plays a significant role in how men look at the issue of violence against women. We know that because of the diversity that's here in New York City, men come from different cultures where this may not be spoken about, this may not be challenged. One of the things I like to do in the groups of men that I work with is challenge them. You know, we all get messages that women to some degree are respected. So what changes when we get into a relationship with women in our lives, right? Once we become intimate, that should not change. Well, the respect that we look for and seek for the women that we care for and we love is the same respect that we should be giving to women that we're involved with, the women we work with, right? So the message should be that as men, we're going to promote healthy masculinity, and we need to define what that is as well, right? Because certain things about being a man are great, but there are others that we have to redefine, because the way in which we take them and we use them is not safe for women. Right? And those are some of the conversations that we need to have, because, again, it's not until men begin to take action that we can begin to make inroads in ending violence against women. And just looking at that in its own, ending violence against women, leaves us out of the picture. We have to name the problem in order to deal with the problem. And the fact is that we as men have a huge role to play in that. But first we have to be real with each other and keep it real with each other, right? Like, if there's someone committing violence in my community, I need to address the issue. I should not get a pass for the things I do in my relationship that are going to affect my family.
Rather than tomorrow.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Well, Michelle, looking at this landscape, knowing that women are more often the victims of this violence, what do you think of the sort of split in resources and attention in putting help into victims versus stopping perpetrators or catching young men before they even become perpetrators? Have we balanced the scales enough and firing on both pistons, essentially?
I think we need to take a closer look at what's going on with perpetrators of violence and why they're committing the violence and what can be done to address it, to stop it. And there's a lot of work now going here in the city and across the country looking at that. In terms of resources, we could always use more resources, but the Brooklyn District Attorney's Office is the lead partner in the Family Justice Center. So we have a Family Justice Center at the Brooklyn District Attorney's Office, which is a partnership with 23 different agencies that provide a wide range of support services.
And it's really been pioneering across the country to provide this sort of holistic 360-degree view of life for domestic violence survivors. Like we talked about, people being forced into homelessness.
Yeah.
It's not just a problem of someone hitting you.
Yeah.
It goes on and on.
There are many different issues that arise. Brooklyn was the first in New York City to have a Family Justice Center, and one of 15 in the United States from a grant from the United States Justice Department. So we are really a model. We get visitors from all over the world that come to see the Family Justice Center. To show how we are able to provide all different types of support, that it's not just about the assault that brings someone in. They need housing, employment.
And it's a single point of entry, too. Yeah. It's not like you're running all across town to get these resources.
Exactly, yeah.
Well, we could talk about this all day. We are running out of time. I just going to put the website up one more time, but for people that want to make the pledge, where do they go to make the pledge?
Itsonus.org.
Okay.
Thank you both for being here. We appreciate it. We'll keep talking about it.
Thank you.
I sent my email this morning.
Okay, fantastic.
Great.